With all of our benefits in cloud computing, one thing we cannot avoid talking about is the bill and how we pay for it. Somebody ultimately has to pay for all the fun that we get to do in the data center or in the public cloud. And so that brings us on to cloud economics, a very, very important topic. Well, to begin, let's just talk about economies of scale, because this is one of the big things that the public cloud providers are able to bring to us. And economies of scale, by definition, is the ability to do things more efficiently or at a lower cost per unit when operating at a larger scale. And if you haven't looked at the videos of, say, the Microsoft data centers that are out there that support Azure, highly encourage you to do so. It's fascinating just to see what they've built, and they're just really, really good at it. So what does this mean from a benefits to us perspective? Well, again, they can provide, and pass on these economies of scale to us as consumers. And what that means in real terms is they can acquire hardware at lower cost to begin with. So if we need to go and build data centers, we have to go get, Intel processors, servers, storage, etc. We're buying, much smaller amount than Microsoft, Amazon, Google are able to acquire. So they're able to pass these costs on down to us. People joke it's kind of a race to the bottom because every time Amazon drops the price, then Microsoft does, and vice versa. And so ultimately, this is getting passed on to us as the consumer. Local government deals are also a big thing, and these could be things around, negotiating power in the area, incentives and things that the local government in the area will provide to create jobs in their area as well. And so that sort of gets passed back on down to us. And then just data center efficiencies. Again, Microsoft, Amazon, Google are just really, really good at building these data centers. And again, highly encourage you to check out the videos that they have around building a data center. Then if we look at CapEx versus OpEx, you really need to understand this because there's two models essentially that we work in from a financial perspective that your CFO will be interested in knowing, well, okay, am I preferring to spend in CapEx? Do I prefer to spend in an OpEx environment? Some of that is just by your company that you work with, but it's worth understanding the differences. So if we look at CapEx, first of all, the spending on the infrastructure is completed up front. So again, think on premises, hey, I've got a big application launch. I'm going to have to go and buy all the servers I need. I'm probably going to have to overbuy to be sure I've got enough so I don't run out of capacity, and then I can write my costs off over time. Compare that to OpEx, and one of the big benefits you'll quickly see with public cloud, I don't have these upfront costs. I just pay for the service as I consume it, and I deduct it from my tax bill in the same year as the expense occurs. So again, think of OpEx, it's an expense, it's like a monthly expense that's coming out, and it's basically added up in the year and goes against the bottom line for the company's balance sheet. CapEx, I've got this big upfront cost. Maybe every 5 years I do a refresh and I've got a big expense there, but then I write that off over time. And there are pros and cons, to both. Typical on-premises CapEx costs are as follows. So server costs being a big one. We pay a lot for compute. We pay a lot, for storage that we want to provision on premises. We have our network costs, all the Cisco gear that we have to put in place, network cabling, etc. We have backup and archive costs, and we have data center costs. That's power, cooling. Plus, don't forget disaster recovery. We typically have to have a second data center to replicate workloads to in the event of a disaster. So these are just some of the costs that you would incur, but pretty common on premises when we are building out server hardware. And this is typically CapEx. Today, there are some cases where you can rent equipment from some vendors, but for the most part, it's typically CapEx on-prem. Now, if we look at OpEx costs for cloud computing, we've got server lease costs, we've got software and feature leases, and usage and demand and cost scaling. So why do we sort of put it like this? Well, a lot of it is lease again. So think about it that way. I'm going to rent the server. I'm going to rent the storage. When I stop using it, that cost ultimately goes away. At the same time, I can sort of include software, other features into those bundles with me. And as my usage and demand of scale goes up and down, I'll have some costs there. And sometimes I'll have some management costs as well. So, again, these are kind of the typical OpEx costs that you will see for cloud computing. Now, look at the benefits again from both sides. So the CapEx benefits, we have predictability. I know exactly what I'm paying. It's cost effective when I can consume the infrastructure quickly. It can be cost effective too if I've got a lot of steady state workloads that are going to run the same throughout their lifespan. I might get a benefit of CapEx there again from that predictability. OpEx benefits, real benefit is try and buy. I think the fact that we can fail fast, fail often, try things out, not incur a huge expense. If it doesn't work, I just stop paying for it. I just turn it off. I've got these low initial costs, and as my demand fluctuates, I can move up and down with that workload from a scale perspective. So a lot of benefits to OpEx there, and still definitely some benefits to CapEx as well. So in closing, yeah, really just fully understand, CapEx typically on-prem, OpEx typically associated in the cloud, not exclusively that way, but really understand the benefits here. And if you're taking the AZ900 exam, you will probably get questions around what's the right way to go. Probably going to be geared more towards OpEx and the public cloud from the perspective, and some of the scenarios they will give you. But with that concludes this lecture on economics.